The United States federal government should ban all testing that requires the use of animals. Testing that requires the use of animals is neither morally sound nor scientifically necessary. I'll begin my argument for the banning of testing that requires animals by delving into the moral problem with the use of animals as mere objects. According to the Ethics of Medical Testing, an article published by PETA and supported by numerous sources, quote, each year more than 100 million animals are killed in the U.S. laboratories for chemical, drug, food, and cosmetics testing, biology lessons, medical training, and curiosity-driven experimentation, close quotes. It is certainly not moral to smear cosmetics on an animal in order to have fewer wrinkles or satisfy some scientific curiosity. These animals are sometimes treated with exceptional cruelty. The same source elaborates on the details of the forced toxic inhalations, immobilization, skin being burned off, and other horrors the animals face. Quote, in addition to the torment of the actual experiments, animals in laboratories are deprived of everything that is natural and important to them. They are confined to barren cages, socially isolated, and physically traumatized. Close quotes. You may be asking yourself, aren't humans superior to animals, and wouldn't this superiority justify treating them in whatever regard we choose? This disgusting sentiment is unfortunately all too common flaw in the thought process of modern society and is known as speciesism. Peter Singer, a well-respected Australian philosopher known worldwide for his ideas and publications on this matter, argues from a preference utilitarian perspective. That is, preference dictates the actions of those involved. It is not hard to see where I'm coming from in terms of animal treatment and testing. Singer's argument in his book Animal Liberation simply broken down as this: all things that have the capacity to suffer must be treated equally. Despite obvious differences between human species and various animal species, both can feel pain and pleasure, i.e. not suffering. In the same book, Singer writes, and I quote, racists violate the principle of equality by giving greater weight to the interests of members of their own race when there is a clash between interests and the interests of those of another race. Sexists violate the principle of equality by favoring the interests of their own sex. Similarly, speciesists allow the interests of their own species to override the greater interests of members of other species. The pattern is identical in each case. Close quotes. Morally, one could not justify racism or sexism, so why justify speciesism? In the use of animals for testing, the United States federal government is currently implicitly perpetuating an acceptance of speciesism and thus violating a moral tenet that Homo sapiens as a whole should follow. The scientific necessity of this animal testing is questionable at best. The Medical Research Modernization Committee, a non-for-profit comprised of MDs, PhDs, and other science professionals, recommends epidemiology or human population studies and is quoted in saying, quote, in contrast to artificial animal model conditions that generally differ in causes and mechanisms from human conditions, human population studies have been very fruitful, close quotes. The study then goes on to cite specifics on coronary heart disease risk factors and human trial success. The link is provided in my citations. Even if there are problems with finding consenting human populations, incentives could be offered to entice consensual human trials. Humans with terminal illness, those who have been deemed incurable by consensus of modern medicine, would be perfect models for new drug testing for their illness. They could only gain in life from new drugs, and the last portion of their lives could be dedicated to the bettering of science. AIDS and cancer patients would fit this model well. Other great alternatives to animal testing include, but are not limited to, in vitro testing on artificial or cloned organs or organ systems, and human embryonic testing, both from harvested embryos and coaxing somatic cells into pluripotency. Advances in computing technology now also allow for the computer model to accurately predict biological events. Furthermore, fungi such as C. elegans can serve as a metabolic model in place of animals. Plenty of superior alternatives exist to testing that requires animals in respect to both morality and science. The federal government should be the agent responsible for placing the ban because it's far more powerful than individual states. The strong legislation from the federal government would make it a federal offense for states, corporations, universities, or individuals within the United States to use animal testing. If the states or other agencies were to attempt to implement a ban on testing that requires animals, the process would intrinsically have inconsistencies, as multiple agencies would allow loopholes and other problems to occur. Furthermore, the allowance of smaller agencies to enforce a ban would yield contention, which would ultimately result in a federal Supreme Court decision, which essentially would be a federal ruling that would be a much slower process route to the federal ban. The United States federal government should ban all testing that requires the use of animals based on the previously mentioned moral implications, the abundance of viable alternatives, and the power of the federal government of the United States. Thank you.